Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I discussed in a video I put out earlier today on linear progression for advanced lifters. Some people came in and said, "No, you're wrong. You're wrong. There's no benefit to microloading if you aren't using calibrated plates because the weights can vary a lot from plate to plate." Now, these people are right, but I don't think people understand the concept here. Because if we were to use the logic that several people brought up, that your 500-pound deadlift on the bar could be anywhere from 490 to about 510, unless you're using the exact same plates every time at the gym. So you have a variable range, and you could easily be plus or minus 10 pounds on a 500-pound deadlift. In some cases, depending on some really cheap brands of plates, even more. So there's no point at all to doing this, and I want people to think this through for a moment. And this is this is where people get thrown off with the microloading thing. Well, are any of you out there training with calibrated plates? I'm going to go out on a limb and say at best 1 to 2% of people out there right now have access to calibrated plates year round. So if we use this logic that we don't really know how much weight is on the bar, we don't know, and we could be off by 10, 15 pounds easily. If we use that logic, there's no point in tracking your exact weight at all, is there? Right? In fact, maybe this explains why some days the same weight feels heavier than others. Maybe this is the reason RPE scale is invented. Maybe that's the reason anyone successfully uses that. Could it be because the weights vary from plate to plate, and so your 500 pounds could easily be off 10 pounds? Or 15 or whatever? So again, if we use this logic, wouldn't you just say that you kind of ballparked? Why would you ever write, hey, I benched 315 for 5 today? If we use that logic, you should write, I benched 305 to 325 for 5, right? Or you would just have to say ballpark low 300s with an RPE of 9 for 5 reps. Why aren't people tracking stuff like that in their logs? I mean, if this is the case, if this is really a real concern, I mean, and it is a real concern, why aren't we doing that? Because we need an accurate way to track. And now here's the point I'm going to make with this. You don't know that your weights are off by that far. Meaning there's a lot of companies that guarantee 2%, right? 2%. So what's 500 times 2%? 10 pounds, right? So assuming that, and here's what people are assuming, when they assume that because there's that variation there, that they're assuming that because there's that variation there that they could have between 490 and 510, because 2% is the average acceptable in the industry for most plates, for decent price plates. They're assuming that it could be 490 to 510. But what are the odds of that? Meaning, when you start stacking more and more plates out, when you look at basic statistics here, the more plates you add, the less likely you are to be off by 2%. You're more likely to be off by 2% if you only have one plate on each side, because you could very easily have grabbed the 2 lightest or the 2 heaviest plates in the gym. In other words, out of those 45s, you could have grabbed the 44.1, a pair of 44.1s or 44.2s, and your 135 on the bar could be 133 really easily. Or you could have grabbed, what's our 2% up? It's going to be 45.9. You could have 137 on the bar. But when you start adding multiple plates to each side, assuming there's a wide variation, meaning let's assume all 10 plates have a different weight because of casting variations, of 0.1 pounds variation among them. The odds that you got over half of your plates, or the majority of the plates, let's say 8 out of the 10 plates, are underweight or overweight is actually pretty slim. Because if, let's say, the casting is off and there's a 50-50 on each plate, you basically, if you flip a coin, you're going to need to come up heads 8 out of 10 times. Or for it to be really off, I mean, for it to be a full 2% over or under, it's the equivalent of getting 10 coin flips heads or 10 coin flips tails. It can happen. It can happen, but the odds of that are very, very slim. Statistically, because you're going to be using a variety of mixed plates, some will be a little over, some will be a little under, you're going to have a big bell curve. You're going to have a massive bell curve, with the most common number being 500. If you've put 500 pounds of plates on there. And the least likely number you're going to hit is going to be 490 and 510 as a percentage. So what you have is a bell curve distribution. Okay? And this is just basic math, guys. Basic math and statistics. And you're far more likely statistically, and I mean much, much more likely to be closer to 500 than you are to be 490 or 510. Because of the number of plates and the variables on each one, because each plate could be plus or minus. So when you look at it from that perspective, this doesn't make a lot of sense to say, hey, it's pointless, because here's the thing. What you have when you have 500 on the bar, when you add a pair of microplates, what have you done? You now have a distribution bell curve of 500 with a range of 490 to 510, with 500 being, again, the number you're most likely to hit. If you were to pin it down to one specific pound or among that 21 pound range, or 20 pound range, 500 is the most likely number to hit. 501 and 50 and 499 being the next most likely, down, 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 plus the weight of your microplates. Plus the weight of your microplates. And yes, if you say you come in and you hit a peak set of 5 on the deadlift with that every week, and you micro load upwards and you add your own microplates, statistically every week you are adding 2.5 pounds to the bell curve. Now, is it possible that from one week to the next you might not actually have the jump, and then all of a sudden you have a 5 pound jump instead of a 2.5? Yes. But because you are micro loading, we are still dealing with a 500 average plus 2.5. And then the next week, 205.5 average, again on a bell curve, plus 2.5. So essentially what you are doing, you are still controlling the variable, even though there's a weight range among which you might be lifting. You're still adding 2.5 pounds every week to that weight range that has, again, an average distribution of 500, and then 502.5, then 505. But people need to understand that, again, yes, it's theoretically possible that you're going to get 490 on one day or 510 on a different day with 500 on the bar. It's possible, but it's far less likely that you're going to be at either of those extremes than you're going to be in the middle. And because you're micro loading, you are still ensuring a general upward trend. What you're going to see, if you were to chart this over time, and if you were to go plug in the distributions of what your possible weight range was, your average is still going to go up 2.5 pounds every week. And so if you plot this out over the course of 52 weeks, your average is still going to go up approximately 130 pounds weight on the bar over the course of those 52 weeks. And what I'm suggesting is that in the grand scheme of things, this loading pattern will still work out. It will still work out even if there is some variation in the individual plates week to week. Because, again, you're dealing with a bell curve that's most likely very close to your weight, and you're ensuring an exact upward trend. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the microloading itself is putting your variable of control back upon something that has a slight random factor to it, so that you can ensure an upward trend and progressive overload. All right, and I know some people mean well when they say things like this, but they're not looking at the math of it, and they're not thinking about the way the human body adapts. It doesn't have to be perfect. All we are doing is micro loading very small increments plotted over time to ensure adaptation. And here's the thing, maybe you could assume from 1 week to the next, if you know you're recovering, if maybe the weight felt a little heavier, lighter than it should, you know what, maybe that week you happen to be off by 5 or 6 pounds, up or down. But it's not the end of the world, because the upward trend is still slow and controlled. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.